Welcome back to the History of the Papacy podcast, a podcast about the popes of Rome and Christian Church. Prepare yourself to step behind the ropes and leave the official tour of the story of the popes and Christianity. I am your host, Steve Guerra, and I thank you for joining me on this journey. Hey everybody, welcome back to the History of the Papacy podcast. I am, of course, your host, Steve. Today, I'm jumping into my first episode on this current papal conclave. I have a couple of episodes coming up as retrospectives on the papacy of Pope Francis and Pope Francis's background. I think it's worth at least to give the man some due. He was the Pope for the entirety of the History of the Papacy podcast. So let's give him a little due. And I'll be joined with host of the Popular podcast, Greg Gassman. Greg really ran the ball on this whole Pope Francis mini series. Definitely tune into him because he's going to be giving a lot of background on the Cardinals. He even has a segment of his podcast called Cardinal Numbers, where he will get into all of the details of all of the Cardinals and rank them in a Rex Factor type situation. And he's also going to join Bree and Fry of the Pontifex podcast to do some live streaming, which I may join in on some of that as well as things start to develop, because the conclave is going to start on Wednesday, May 7th of 2025. So they're getting right into it. This episode, I'm going to go all the way back to 2013 on the papal constitutions that actually regulate the whole process of a papal conclave. I'm pretty much going to go with the episode that I did way back then in 2013 because nothing has changed in those constitutions. So you get to hear that. We'll do a little bit more on the election. So look forward to episodes. I'm going to be dropping quite a few episodes in the next few days and weeks. So definitely tune in. And here we go on the Papal Conclave. The process for the election of a pope is laid down in the Apostolic Constitution, Universi Dominici Gregis, which means the Lord's whole flock in Latin. This document has been amended many times by previous popes, especially over the course of the 20th century. The current version was mostly revised by Pope John Paul II in 1996. Pope Benedict XVI made a minor revision to the way the votes are counted in the conclave, and just very recently he made a change in how early a conclave can be held. But essentially, he has kept the document the same. The process for electing a pope has changed significantly over the past 20th century. The very first pope after Peter was Linus. He was the only pope to be appointed by his predecessor. Otherwise, after this, the popes would be selected in some variation of the conclave process. The consular conclave process has been the problem-solving process for the Church since basically day one. We will discuss the Jerusalem Council in an upcoming podcast. This was the first formal church council. James the Just was chosen to be Bishop of Jerusalem in a conclave by the original 70 disciples, not long after the time of Jesus. When a spot opened up in the original 12 apostles after Judas Iscariot, a vote was held for who should take his spot. The word conclave comes from two Latin words, cum, meaning with, and clavum, meaning keys. The two words come together to have the meaning of something being done in secrecy or locked away. The conclave or council is in a way democratic. It is not popular democracy by any stretch, but it is much more democratic than one would imagine in a highly hierarchical institution such as the Roman Catholic Church. As stated previously, the election process has changed quite a bit since the founding of the papacy. So in this episode, we will just focus in on the current process for electing a pope. In a future episode, we will take a more detailed look at the history and evolution of the papal selection process over the years. The Apostolic Constitution contains the set of rules or canons that govern the papal election process. It is not a short document. It is broken up into 2 parts, then 12 chapters, 5 chapters in part 1 and 7 chapters in part 2. It is then further broken up into 84 individual points or articles. We have spoken about cardinals previously, and they will be the ones who select the next pope. If you would like to learn more about the College of Cardinals, you can listen to the previous History of the Papacy podcast episode on the College of Cardinals. You can also refer to the Code of Canon Laws, Canons 349 through 359. These canons are pretty detailed as to the responsibilities and the rights of the cardinals. The cardinals weren't always the only electors of the pope. At one time, the electors could be influential people who were both from the laity and clerical classes. Aristocrats from around Rome, powerful priests, and deacons would participate. In the year 1059, the rules would change so that only cardinals could elect the Roman pope. It is important to note that there is nothing written in stone that the cardinals have to be the electors of the pope. In his role as the supreme pontiff of the church, the pope can change the rules at any time. He can change the number of electors, who the electors are, where the election takes place, or anything else. The next pope could change it all again if he wants to as well. That is the nature of the office. But over the past several centuries, a few themes and sets of precedents have emerged. Many of the current rules for how the Pope is elected to ensure a quick process so that the amount of time that the papacy is in sede vacante, or open episcopal see, is made as short as possible. Historically, there has been a major problem of papal elections taking a long time. Some took many months, and others into years. This interregnum was disruptive to the spiritual and administrative life of the Church. The first step in the process for the election of a pope is the death, or in the very rare resignation, of a pope. When a pope dies, a few things happen. First, the pope needs to be confirmed and certified to be actually dead. This is the job of the Camerlengo of the Holy Roman Church. We will speak a bit more of the role of the Camerlengo, the Holy Roman Church, in a few minutes. Once the Camerlengo, in modern times with the assistance of a medical doctor, certifies that the Pope is dead, he seals the papal offices and secures the previous Pope's personal and official papers and documents. The Pope's papers will be dealt with at a later time based upon his wishes. The Camerlengo also takes responsibility and accounts for the papal residences in and around Rome. These include the Castle Gandolfo, Palace of St. John Lateran, and the Vatican residences. An interesting fact about the Archbasilica of St. John Lateran is that it is the official cathedral church of the Pope. Yet, the St. John Lateran Basilica is not in the Vatican city-state. St. Peter's Basilica, in the center of the Vatican city-state, is not the Pope's cathedral church. Every bishop has a church that is his home base or cathedral church. Once the Pope is confirmed to be dead and his residences are accounted for, the process for the papal election officially begins. The first chapter of the Part 1 of the Universi Dominici Gregis deals with what happens during the sede vacante period. As mentioned previously, there has been a major problem in the past of the interregnum between popes taking a long time, so caused instability in secular politics as well. The first article clearly states that the College of Cardinals cannot overturn or change any of the laws or decisions of the previous pope in the sede vacante period. If something needs to be changed or updated, it is to be left until the next pope takes his place. The College of Cardinals can't do much of anything during the period between the popes, except for choosing the next pope. Their ability to administrate is severely curtailed. They have the authority to do a bare minimum to keep the church functioning. Based on the canons, the only time the cardinals can act on an issue is in the case of an extreme emergency. The canons don't exactly define what an extreme emergency is, but there are a few checks on the cardinals taking emergency powers. Firstly, if there is a case of an extreme emergency, the entire College of Cardinals must vote on the action, and there must be a majority of cardinals voting for the action. That would slow down an overly ambitious cardinal, because there are so many cardinals broken into factions, it would be difficult to make that sort of political play in the short time they are together. Another check on the cardinals from overreaching during the vacancy period is the fact that immediately after the death of a pope, all of the department heads of the Roman Curia end their positions. The Curia is the administrative arm of the Vatican. There are only two positions that continue after the death of the Pope, and that is the Camerlengo and the Major Penitentiary. They are the administrators of the church during the vacancy, but without major department heads in the Curia, it is a minimal amount of administration just until the next Pope is selected. All of these checks incentivize the cardinals to act quickly in the conclave and get a new pope elected. All of these checks are based on the idea that the pope is the supreme power of the church and that he is the representative of God on earth. So it is his duty to administer the church. It also ensures that one powerful cardinal or a group of cardinals can't try to run things behind the scene and drag their feet in electing a pope. So far, we are just after the death of the Pope, and for the most part, the process should be mostly the same after the resignation date of the current Pope goes into effect. Within 3 days of the death of the Pope, the cardinals must meet to start planning the next conclave. Chapter 2 of the Universi Dominici Gregis document deals with the nuts and bolts administrative aspects of the cardinals coming together. The leading cardinals come together at the Vatican and have a pre-planning meeting. In this meeting, they will discuss the leading contenders amongst the College of Cardinals and plan some of the more mundane items, such as the meeting rooms they will need, the accommodations for the incoming cardinals, among other details. Once the cardinals have all come together, they will say an oath before the opening of the conclave. They will take a number of oaths, but this is the first. We, the cardinals of the Holy Roman Church, of the order of bishops, of priests, and of deacons, promise, pledge, and swear, as a body and individually, to observe exactly and faithfully all of the norms contained in the Apostolic Constitution, Universi Dominici Gregis, of the Supreme Pontiff, John Paul II, and to maintain rigorous secrecy with regard to all matters in any way related to the election of the Roman Pontiff, or those which, by their very nature, during the vacancy of the Apostolic See, call for the same secrecy. Next, each cardinal shall add, and I, name, cardinal name, so promise, pledge, and swear, and he'll place his hand on the gospel, he will add, so help me God and these holy gospels which I now touch with my hand. A cardinal is normally referred to as his first name, then the word cardinal, and then their last name. For example, Peter Turkson is a leading cardinal. He would be called Peter Cardinal Turkson. Importantly, this chapter also states that each cardinal elector pretty much must attend the conclave or else have a really good reason why they aren't going to be there. Electing the next pope and attendance at the papal conclave is an obligation of the cardinals. At the initial meeting, the cardinals are to discuss the major issues that face the church and start to discuss who might be a good candidate for the next pope. The Camerlengo must also officially destroy the former pope's ring, known as the Fisherman's Ring, and his lead seal for sealing official apostolic documents. Here we see that the intention of this act is to ensure that nobody can act in the name of the dead pope. Hey, Steve here. If you're enjoying the History of the Papacy podcast, consider joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/History of the Papacy. We're working toward going completely listener funded, which means no more ads ever. When you join, you get early access to episodes, monthly book giveaways, and most importantly, your name is added to the History of the Papacy Diptychs, our own list of commemorated supporters. You can become an Antioch level supporter for just $3 per month. But it makes a huge difference to making the History of the Papacy ad-free and independent. Nobody likes ads, not you, not me, and I'm the guy who records them. So let's just get rid of them. Visit patreon.com/History of the Papacy and join today. There are only a few requirements that a cardinal must meet to be able to participate in the conclave. Really, the only one requirement is that the cardinal cannot be over 80 years old. If the cardinal meets that requirement, they are in, and they can't not be invited or be disinvited for any reason. There are at least a few cardinals who people are saying shouldn't participate for one reason or the other, usually some type of scandal, but the canons are specific that no cardinal can be excluded. There is only one exception to this rule, and it is that a cardinal who has been deposed or removed from his office is not allowed to join in the conclave. Currently, there are 120 cardinal elector positions authorized to be filled by the Pope at any one time. We've mentioned the Camerlengo of the Holy Roman Church several times. Let's take a quick look at what the office of the Camerlengo is and what the responsibilities of this office are. The word Camerlengo is related to the word chamberlain. The chamberlain is not a term used often in the United States for a government official, but it is much more common in parts of Europe, especially historically. The chamberlain takes care of the finances of the sovereign monarch. The Camerlengo of the Holy Roman Church functions in the same way. The Camerlengo is responsible for all of the financial activities of the Church and answers directly to the Pope. Throughout history, this position has been extremely important and powerful. This is a high-level governmental financial position responsible for billions of dollars of cash and assets. The Camerlengo has responsibility over the collection of dues owed to the Pope from the appointment of bishops and abbots. He also registers and accounts for the money and gifts donated to the Church from local parishes all over the world. It is a complicated system. Money is donated at the local level and moves up through the system to the Vatican. His office is comparable to a prime minister along with the Secretary of the Treasury or Chancellor of the Exchequer. Most importantly, for the election of the next Pope, when the Church goes into the sede vacante period, the Camerlengo is one of the very few offices that remains in place. In fact, the Camerlengo's powers increase. The Camerlengo becomes the head of the College of Cardinals during this period and is responsible for making the papal election happen and run smoothly. The Roman Curia basically shuts down during the interregnum period. The canons on the papal election are clear on this. The Curia can't do much of anything. There are many articles that say the Curia can't do this or they can't do that. The Curia shuts down because they don't want things running as normal. They want the entire focus of the Church on electing a new Pope. As I've said, this is a major theme. The Pope is the head of the Church, and the authority to administer the Church comes directly through him and his office, not through department heads or high-level administrators. The cardinals really have an incentive to get the next pope elected. The only part of the church that works pretty much normally during the interregnum is the canon courts. They can continue to hear cases and make judgments on items that are already in the works. During the sede vacante period, any ecumenical or church council that is going on, for example, Vatican II during the 1960s, must be put on hold until the next pope is elected. This part of the canons also deals with preparations for the funeral of the Pope. We have finally come to the portion of the Universi Dominici Gregis, which deals with the election of the Pope. It is an interesting process. The text provides a great deal of detail for many of the aspects of the Papal Conclave, but some other aspects of the conclave come from tradition. One such tradition is the color of the smoke from burning the ballots, indicating the vote has resulted in an election or not an election. Dark or black-colored smoke indicates that there wasn't enough votes, while white smoke indicates there was. It does not mention that little piece of trivia one time in the document. In the past, there has been confusion over the color of the smoke, so now they put additives into the fire that make the smoke coloring more distinctive, so not to create confusion. We are at the point where the previous pope is no longer in power, caused either by death or resignation. The previous canons, completed by John Paul II from 1996, outlined a window of time that said the conclave couldn't start within 15 days of the death of the pope or more than 20 days. Benedict XVI amended the canon so that the conclave can begin sooner than 15 days after the end of the previous pope's reign if the College of Cardinals are ready to start the conclave. There are just a few last details that need to be taken care of before the actual conclave can begin. We will take a look at the place where the conclave will be held and the living accommodations of the cardinals while they are in conclave. The entire conclave takes place within the Vatican City limits. The cardinals will stay in the Domus Sanctae Marthae, or St. Martha's house, and the conclave meetings will take place in the Sistine Chapel, which is located in the Apostolic Palace. I have placed a link of the Vatican City on the Facebook page that you can take a look at to orientate yourself. Basically, St. Peter's Basilica is more or less right in the middle of the Vatican on an east-west axis. The Domus Sanctae Marthae is just south of St. Peter's, and the Apostolic Palace is just north of St. Peter's. The two places are fairly close together, only about a quarter of a mile or half a kilometer or so apart from each other. The Domus is normally a hotel or hospice where guests of the Pope or the Holy See stay when they are in the Vatican on official business, when it is not in use for a papal conclave. It was built in 1996 to replace a much older facility. It is built in a 16th century style, but with all the modern amenities. There are 129 guest rooms. 109 of those rooms are suites with an attached bathroom and study. The rooms include TV, telephone, and internet access. There are also meeting rooms and chapels located in the Domus. The cardinals are assigned rooms in the Domus by lottery, not according to their relative rank in the College of Cardinals. There are a certain minimal number of custodial, cooking, and housekeeping staff allowed in the Vatican during the conclave. There is a team of medical doctors and staff on premises because many of the cardinals are in advanced age and have a variety of medical issues. As we will see later, some cardinal electors are even too infirm to even leave their rooms or beds. So there is a mechanism to allow them to participate in the voting. Additionally, there are a number of priests on hand to take cardinals' confessions and perform other liturgical duties. All of these non-cardinal staff are under a complete oath of secrecy. They are also closely vetted by Vatican security staff, and if they break their oath of secrecy, they are subjected to the highest penalties the Church can cast, including complete excommunication. Here is the text of the oath they take. I, the person states their name, promise and swear that, unless I should receive a special faculty given expressly by the newly elected pontiff or by his successors, I will observe absolute and perpetual secrecy with all who are not part of the College of Cardinal Electors concerning all matters directly or indirectly related to the ballots cast and their scrutiny for the election of the Supreme Pontiff. I likewise promise and swear to refrain from using any audio or video equipment capable of recording anything which takes place during the period of the election within the Vatican City, and in particular anything which in any way directly or indirectly is related to the process of the election itself. I declare that I take this oath fully aware that an infraction thereof will make me subject to the spiritual and canonical penalties which the future Supreme Pontiff will see fit to adopt, in accordance with Canon 1399 of the Code of Canon Law. So help me God, and these holy Gospels which I touch in my hand. As I said, these are no small penalties or reactions. One major thing to keep in mind is that the Vatican is on complete lockdown during the conclave. Cardinals cannot have any communication with the outside world at all. There is no access to telephones, email, newspapers, letters, or any other communication method. In fact, technicians sweep all of the meeting rooms in important areas for bugs and other audio-visual recording equipment throughout the conclave. It is actually stated in the canons that this should be done. One of the Camerlengo's responsibilities is to ensure the absolute secrecy of the proceedings and that there is no outside communications. Several different parts of the election canon discuss secrecy and how the cardinals should be sealed off from the outside. It is almost like a season of Big Brother reality program.
Steve here with a quick word from our sponsors.
Now, we're ready to talk about and move on to the actual beginning of the conclave. Everyone is settled into their accommodations, and now it's time to vote. But not quite. Firstly, the cardinals meet in St. Peter's Basilica. They perform a Eucharistic Mass, and then they have a procession chanting Veni Creator Spiritus. In the previous mini-episode, we talked about the importance of this chant. This opening Mass should be conducted in the morning if at all possible. The Dean of the College of Cardinals then reads the following oath to the cardinals. We, the cardinal electors present in this election of the Supreme Pontiff, promise, pledge, and swear, as individuals and as a group, to observe faithfully and scrupulously the prescriptions contained in the Apostolic Constitution of the Supreme Pontiff John Paul II, Universi Dominici Gregis, published on 22 February 1996. We likewise promise, pledge, and swear that whichever of us by divine disposition is elected Roman Pontiff will commit himself faithfully to carrying out the munus patrinum of pastor of the universal church, and will not fail to affirm and defend strenuously the spiritual and temporal rights and liberties of the Holy See in a particular way. We promise and swear to observe with the greatest fidelity and with all persons, clerical or lay, secrecy regarding everything that in any way relates to the election of the Roman Pontiff and regarding that occurs in the place of the election, directly or indirectly related to the results of the voting. We promise and swear not to break this secret in any way, either during or after the election of the new pontiff, unless explicit authorization is granted by the same pontiff, and never to lend support or favor to any interference, opposition, or any other form of intervention whereby secular authorities of whatever order and degree or any group of people or individuals might wish to intervene in the election of the Roman Pontiff. After the dean, as the most senior cardinal, reads the oath, then the cardinals say this oath over the gospel book individually according to seniority, and I, cardinal says his name in this spot, do so promise, pledge, and swear. The cardinal then places his hands on the gospel and says, so help me God and these holy gospels which I touch with my hand. The election begins right after this oath. The election process is detailed in Part 2, Chapters 5 of the Universi Dominici Gregis. In previous papal elections, there were a few other ways popes could be elected. They were by acclamation and inspiration. We will get into these two types in a later podcast in this series because they will be important in another papal election, specifically that of Pope Celestine V. These two methods of electing a pope are prohibited. At one time, cardinals voted by voice vote, but that is now codified that cardinals should vote exclusively by secret ballot. There are a number of procedures in place to assure the ballots are secret too. In order for the balloting to go smoothly, the most junior cardinal deacon, basically the lowest man in the college, picks lots for 3, positions that have scrutineer, infirmariae, and revisers. 3 cardinals are picked for each of these positions. Let's quickly describe the jobs of the 3 positions. The scrutineers have the most duties. They observe the cardinals placing their ballots, collect ballots from the infirmariae, and they count the ballots to make sure there are the correct amount needed, thereby making sure the ballot box hasn't been stuffed. The infirmariae collect the ballots of the cardinals who are too sick or infirm to physically place their ballots into the ballot hopper. There are a number of checks in place to keep them honest. The final position is the revisers. The revisers double-check the final counts of the scrutineers. All of the cardinals who hold one of these positions still have the right to vote. The actual ballot is described in detail. The ballot is a rectangular piece of paper with the words Elegio in Summum Pontificem on top, which in plain English means I elect as Pope, ... The cardinal writes the name of the person who he prefers on the bottom of that. He then folds the ballot 2 times. This is all detailed in the canons. Once everyone has had the chance to place their ballot, the scrutiny begins. The first part of the scrutiny is placing the ballots into the receptacle. The cardinals place their votes into the receptacle, and they say the following oath: I call as my witness Christ the Lord, who will be my judge, that my vote is given to the one who before God I think should be elected. The cardinals cast their vote in order of precedence, starting with the most senior cardinal. The ballots are then mixed up and counted to make sure they are all accounted for. If the numbers don't add up, all of the ballots are discarded and burned, and the voting starts all over again. There are 2 balloting sessions in the morning, generally, and 2 in the afternoon. The ballots are then opened. The scrutineers say the name on the ballot aloud and record the name. They then pierce the ballot with a needle on a string through the word Elegio on the ballot. This is meant to keep the ballot safe from tampering or double counting. The ballots are then double counted again. A person needs a 2/3 supermajority of cardinals to be elected. If a particular person gets to a 2/3 majority of votes, then he's the next pope, habemus papam, and we're all done. If only it were so easy. Whether a pope is elected or not, the ballots are burned. That is where we get the white and black smoke. It might make things clearer if they did green or red smoke, which is very possible given modern chemistry, but that's besides the point. Whatever the outcome, the Camerlengo draws up a document declaring the outcome of each session. So let's say there are 3 days of voting and there's no pope elected. There is a 1-day suspension of balloting, and there is time for prayer, meetings, reflection, and speeches. The cardinals then go for 7 more ballots. If there is still no pope selected, there is another suspension of voting with more prayer, reflection, etc. Basically recapping what's happened. They will go through this process a number of more times. If it goes beyond a certain point, the Camerlengo reviews what has happened with the voting so far with the cardinals. The voting will then go to an absolute majority, or what we might call in the U.S. governmental system a simple majority. It goes from a 2/3 majority to just a plain 50% majority. Even in the case of papal resignation, these rules must be followed. So we've come to the point where a pope has been elected. The Cardinal Dean asks, do you accept your canonical election as Supreme Pontiff? If the person says yes, the Cardinal Dean will then say, by what name do you wish to be called? All of this is in Latin, by the way. If the person elected is already a bishop, they will immediately become the pope. But if in the highly unlikely situation where the person is not a bishop, he will be ordained a bishop and then made pope. The new pope will take possession of his cathedral church, the St. John Lateran Basilica, which, by the way, is not in the Vatican State, as stated earlier, but is about 5 kilometers or 3 miles away or so in the city of Rome proper. The last bit of the canons deal with what not to do during the papal election. There should be no simony or in other words, buying or selling of the ecclesiastical offices. And simony also ties us all the way back to our St. Peter episode. Simon Magus was an important figure in the early church that we will need to take a little bit further look at. Simony will be a gigantic problem in the church for a long time. There shouldn't be any compromises or wheeling or dealing either. As we've talked about before, there definitely shouldn't be any outside communications. Another no-no is that the person who is elected shouldn't turn the papacy down. They can if they choose, but they really shouldn't. If a cardinal breaks one of the other rules, they will be excommunicated. So now you know what to expect in the Papal Conclave. This is a really fascinating process, and it will be exciting to see how it unfolds. In the next few episodes, we will continue to explore the history that is emerging right before our eyes. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you on our next stop on our trip through the history of the Roman popes.
The Historical Jesus Podcast is the sweeping saga of the life and times of Galilean Jesus of Nazareth, as well as the faith, religion, and church founded to honor and disseminate his acts and teachings. Join me, Mark Vinette, on this fascinating journey through time, exploring the many great works of Christian theology, literature, architecture, music, and art inspired by the words and deeds of Jesus Christ.